Oklahoma wheat farmers have had a lot to deal with since they planted this wheat crop. They experienced extremely dry weather in the fall. Then at the beginning of harvest, damp weather kept combines out of some fields. But once they got rolling, things went relatively smooth. The president of the Oklahoma Wheat Growers Association says this crop is better than most farmers expected.
Fortunately, that the late rains may have done us a little more good than we thought they might. We thought they were too late, but I believe that they helped the wheat fill out and mature out better.
Buck, the wheat market is depressed now. What's it going to take to increase the price of wheat?
Of course, we normally expect a little drop in market at harvest time, but what it'll take to bring a market back, in my opinion, is some good sales of wheat, whether it be to Russia, and they're about the only ones that buy, or they're the main ones that buy in volume adequate to really have an effect on the market.
Although the Russian grain embargo has been lifted, Clements says American farmers will feel the effects of the embargo for a long time. In fact, he says the embargo is one of the reasons the price of wheat is as low as it is. Ben McCain, Action 4.
An official with the National Cattlemen's Association says the Agriculture Department should stop issuing price forecasts for cattle. Ellis Freeney, the executive vice president of the Oklahoma Cattlemen's Association, says that might not be a bad idea.
Those projections have been very misleading to people, and they have encouraged people to buy, feed cattle, borrow money based on those high-priced projections, and there's gotten a lot of people in trouble.
Freeney added that the United States Department of Agriculture should continue providing information that private industry has difficulty obtaining, such as the total cattle population in the country and the total number of cattle in feedlots. A recent survey of cattlemen showed that most feel the USDA's price forecasting is of little or no value. Ben McCain, Action 4.
Opal Doggins is grateful to have a permanent job today. She is one of 300 people in Oklahoma City to be phased out of a CETA job program. But the job training she received in CETA has helped her be placed in a permanent position. In fact, all but 86 people have found some work relating to the training from the Title IID CETA program. It stops tomorrow. This is the second CETA employment program to end as a result of funding cuts by the Reagan administration. It's a program that will be missed, but there are others.
It gave me a better opportunity to get a new job, which is, much more than I expected.
So yes, it is a significant part of our program, but I want to reemphasize the fact that it's not all of CETA, but it is a significant portion of it because it is what we refer to as our jobs portion. People actually working, getting salaries, earning skills that they probably normally would not have had opportunity to have.
CETA officials say they understand how important it is to make cuts when the economy needs it. However, they feel more thought should go into what will be the long-term effect on the public. Ed Stewart, Action 4 in downtown Oklahoma City.
The bill gives non-merit system employees an across-the-board 12% salary increase. Merit system employees will be given raises ranging from 10% to as high as 70%. Governor George Nigh told reporters he was pleased to sign the bill giving state employees more money.
I feel that the state employees have a right to be paid at a level comparable to private enterprise, and the goal of this administration is that that would be true. This is a giant step forward for state employees. I will say very, very proudly that there has been a very small amount of criticism of this large a pay raise for our state employees, because even the private sector is among the first to realize that our state employees have been underpaid.
The kicker to this bill is that it includes a payroll deduction provision. Earlier in the session, the governor vetoed a bill authorizing such deductions for membership dues to the Oklahoma Public Employees Association.
Those favoring the deduction provision included it in the pay raise bill, making it difficult for the governor to veto, because if he vetoed that one part, the entire package would be finished. And the governor wouldn't do that because the pay raise, he feels, is his greatest accomplishment. Ben McCain, Action 4, the Capitol.
The nice things that make an evening special, and all of it, the food, the wine, the music, all of it in honor of a car. Not any car, of course, the 1981 Rolls Royce. Close to $100,000 worth of rolls. A bit much, isn't it? I mean, it's only 4 wheels and a couple of ashtrays. Make that finely crafted ashtrays. But still, all this for a car?
Oh, I think you feel a little more important or different. I don't know. I drive them occasionally, and something about it, people stop and look at you, and you can park the car in front of any hotel and no parking zone. People just come up and look at the car. Anybody besides the police, you know. It's just an interesting car. It really is.
Sitting in the front seat is as close as most people will ever get to owning a Rolls Royce. But for those with the loose change, there's a new one waiting. In fact, it looks kind of lonely sitting there in the window. So hurry. Tom Newcomb, Action 4 in Northwest Oklahoma City.
Sheep ranchers often have problems with coyotes killing their stock. Years ago, ranchers used a chemical called Compound 1080 to kill the predators. But 9 years ago, the poison was banned. Environmentalists said it was killing endangered animals as well as coyotes. The Reagan administration is considering lifting the ban, and livestock raisers certainly support this, according to Dr. Newt Flora with the Department of Agriculture.
So this is extremely important to individuals who, for example, might be raising sheep or have a lot of cattle where they're having small calves that coyotes or wolves might be attacking, or to a poultryman who might have large numbers of turkeys or chickens that coyotes might be attacking. So in some instances, it would be fairly important to them.
Dr. Flora says if the ban is lifted, the chemical should be used with extreme caution. National farm leaders are hoping the chemical will be available soon, since some ranchers continue to suffer heavy stock losses due to coyotes. Ben McCain, Action 4.
At first glance, this house located at 1619 West Park Place appears fine. But Nancy Johnson is embarrassed by the work done on her house, and she blames the Oklahoma City Urban Renewal Authority for the problem. Mrs. Johnson borrowed $25,000 of low-interest money from a loan program called 312, which is administered by the authority. The house is a mess as far as workmanship goes. The loan was supposed to pay contractors to restore the house's condition. However, Mrs. Johnson and others who participated in 312 say in their cases the houses look worse now that the work is supposed to be finished. Mrs. Johnson says part of the problem is urban renewal allows only a select few contractors to do repair work. And she told us more of what she considers a living nightmare.
There is nothing done properly in my house. As you said, they were from July to December. The majority of that time, my home was left unlocked for them to come and go as they please. There was theft on the property, which, quote, the contractor did not have any insurance to cover. If I wanted anything done, I would have to use my homeowners. Women were seen in and out of my house by neighbors that are home. They abused my property.
Here's another example of the workmanship done on Mrs. Johnson's porch. Rotten wood that was even painted with the wrong type of paint. But the contractors told Mrs. Johnson that as long as you can drive a nail through the wood, then it must not be rotten. $15,000 worth of work? Well, Mrs. Johnson doesn't think so. In fact, she thinks she was ripped off. She's just wondering now who to point the finger at, so that the right people will be punished. Ed Stewart, Action 4 in Northwest Oklahoma City.
Roper was taken into custody as a suspect. Officials say the two had an argument shortly before the incident. As Brown left with his common-law wife, he was shot with a .38 caliber handgun. Paramedics worked over him feverishly for several minutes before taking him to Presbyterian Hospital, where he was pronounced dead on arrival. Ted Brown, Action 4.
Fort Cobb Reservoir supplies drinking water to Anadarko, Chickasha, and other nearby communities. When the Environmental Protection Agency announced plans to put the chemical 2,4-D into the reservoir to control water weeds, some citizens started voicing concern. The chemical application was delayed, and the water weed continued to grow. And Jerry Lola, a superintendent at Fort Cobb, says that causes problems.
It creates an odor and a taste in the water. It displaces water and gives you could give you a false security of thinking you had a full reservoir when you didn't. It also is a hazard to all aspects of recreation.
According to a random survey taken by the Anadarko Chamber of Commerce, most citizens here appear to be in favor of the chemical application. The owner of the Beaver Restaurant in Anadarko is Maxine Frankie. She serves water to her customers on a daily basis. The water is piped in from Fort Cobb Reservoir.
Mrs. Frankie, you've lived in Anadarko 18 years, and you've operated a business here that long. How do you feel about the fact that they're considering putting the chemical 2,4-D into the water supply?
Well, I feel like they should. We've been using it for several years. It's been doing a good job. I see no reason to discontinue it. I think it is for the best of the community and everyone who uses the lake, and especially our water supply.
An informational meeting on this controversial issue will be held tonight at 8 o'clock in the high school cafeteria. Representatives from the Environmental Protection Agency, the State Health Department, and State Agriculture Department are scheduled to speak. Concerned citizens will be given a chance to ask questions. Ben McCain, Action 4 in Anadarko.
In this process of explaining this to students, and we expect a lot when we have people of
the and doing items that people, it's right in the right area, information on blood and how important it is for one's life.
One year ago, investors would not be caught dead with the U.S. dollar. The value of the dollar was down, and investors had no confidence in the U.S. currency. Gold was in demand, and the price of gold soared. Now, 1 year later, the situation is reversed. There is a belief the all-American dollar is going to prevail. Fewer people are investing in gold, and its price has dipped to around $400 an ounce.
Well, it is a perception by the majority of investors that the rate of inflation at some point out in the future will be coming down, and therefore dollars would be better held than gold. Any income-related items such as money market funds, such as CDs, treasury bills, good grade short-term corporate and municipal bonds, to name a few.
So it appears many investors now prefer interest-bearing accounts to gold. That's completely opposite from last year. But even the novice investor knows that no investment is without risk. Larry Otis, Action 4.
Dogs are man's best friend, unless they're rabid, of course. Most human rabies is caused by dog bites because they are the animals we come into contact with most. Other animals carry rabies, and increased outdoor activities during the summer months means we may come into contact with them too. No one knows for sure how David Bankhead was infected, but an untreated or unnoticed animal bite was probably the cause. To prevent rabies, any animal bite must be taken seriously.
Any animal bite should be immediately washed thoroughly with soap and water, flushed out with water if possible, and no other medication put on it, just washed out and left open so it can dry out.
The State Health Department tests the brains of 4,000 animals a year for rabies. Less than 200 of them turned up rabid in 1980. So the odds of being infected are very low. But that doesn't mean you can take bites lightly. Because if you wait for the symptoms to appear, you've already waited too long. There is no cure for the disease once it's on its way, and it is always fatal. Ted Brown, Action 4. Police and emergency vehicles rushed to the 300 block of Northeast 5th this evening when word came there had been a double shooting. According to officials, a man drove by the residence and fired shots from his open car window. Two men standing on the porch were hit by the gunfire, one in the leg and the other in the back. Both were taken to nearby hospitals and at last word were doing well. Names have not been released, but detectives on the case say they are looking for a specific suspect. On the other side of town, police are still stumped tonight by a homicide in far northwest Oklahoma City. A woman's body was found late this morning by a passerby on Memorial Road between Mustang and Sarah Roads. She has now been identified as 31-year-old Linda Robinson of 4700 Northwest 23rd. She died apparently from a gunshot wound to the head. Robbery appears to be the motive, but there are no suspects in the case. Ted Brown, Action 4.
Gerald Hammer's face is black and blue. His eyes are almost swollen shut, and he claims he has numerous bruises all over his body after a policeman beat him. This is the house where the alleged incident took place. Gerald said he and his friends were sitting around a table talking when policemen arrived and began questioning them about a sawed-off shotgun. He told them he knew nothing about a gun, but then policemen found a shell in his pocket. He says at that point a policeman took him outside, put him in a police car, and started beating him.
If he had a reason, it'd be a different story, but he didn't have no reason to whoop me like that. Because I didn't do nothing, other than not tell him something I don't know.
Later today, Hammer decided to make a trip across town to talk to the FBI about his complaint. He was limping and said it hurt to move. He said at one point the policeman pushed him to the ground and began jumping on him several times. The FBI ushered Hammer in quickly and listened to his story. But police spokesman Tom Monday says his department has not received a formal complaint.
Our internal affairs unit has received no notification at all from either Mr. Hammer, his attorney, or the FBI that they're investigating. Now, it's my understanding that Mr. Hammer did go to the FBI today, and that, of course, is an avenue that he can pursue.
Meanwhile, Action 4 has learned that charges have been filed against Gerald Hammer himself in the assault and battery of a 3-month pregnant woman. If that's the case, and it is apparent a beating did take place, the question now is, who did it? Bella Shaw, Action 4 at Police Headquarters.
Your car, right? God, I'm glad I haven't got a pack one. Ain't big heavy back. Still, hey guys, got to back up.
A mile-long stretch of I-40 near the I-35 junction was closed off today while wrecker units tried to clear away a crash involving these two trucks. Officers think the driver of the Ford suffered an insulin reaction and lost control. He hit the second truck on the right side in the right lane. The truck skidded along the guardrail for about 50 yards.
I felt the truck weave, and I thought I had a blowout the first few seconds, and it started to skid on me. And time I got it stopped and looked in my mirror, I saw this truck right beside him. He ran right into me on my blind side. I had 2 or 3 witnesses in the back saying he was all over the road, said he almost run a car off the road back the road and run right into me on this side.
Traffic was diverted around the bridge after the late morning accident while crews tried to upright the trucks. One problem the crews encountered was diesel and oil on the roadway from the accident. The slippery pavement meant little traction for the wreckers pulling on already heavy loads. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4 at I-35 and I-40.
The latest victim was found yesterday, nude. An autopsy showed he was intoxicated. A number of transients who frequently indulge in alcohol congregate near the gardens. They're a familiar sight in Oklahoma City, right along Walker and Reno streets. Many of these transients wander around the downtown area, and a couple of them have ended up drowned at the Myriad Gardens. Today, City Councilman Jerry Gilbert, Public Events Director Joe Van Bullard visited the gardens and talked about the problem. Although there are plenty of fences in the area, transients seem to get in. Several people have already been charged with trespassing. Security keeps a watchful eye every half hour, but that hasn't been enough. There's talk of installing closed-circuit television. Solutions just don't come easily.
Well, it's inviting, for one thing, and it was designed to be inviting. And unfortunately, it's not open yet. So I think the real solution here is in really trying to get busy and get the botanical gardens done, do the landscaping that has to be done, and move on toward this target date of next May when we hope that people can come in here legitimately and utilize this park for what it was meant to be, and that was a park to be utilized by people who were downtown.
But May is a year away. Until then, security must be tightened. In fact, while we were doing this story, we saw the problem. 2 young men, one wearing cutoffs, the other wore them underneath his pants, were ready to go swimming. That is, until Joe Van Bullard spotted them on the Myriad Garden grounds and began chase. He told them they were trespassing and that they were off limits.
Until the time that it is open,
We'd certainly appreciate you respecting the no trespassing signs, the lock gates. That should be a pretty good indication, you know, that it isn't open for the public.
Yet somehow the public keeps sneaking in. The city had no idea when it began this project that it would be so attractive to people on hot summer days. And they don't want to feel responsible for any more drownings. Bella Shaw, Action 4 at the Myriad Gardens.
Control it with the nose. Daryl, you're a TV star.
Bill Loveland is responsible for keeping Shawnee residents supplied with water. His daily instrument readings at the city water plant show that Shawnee residents are using more water than normal. That, combined with very little rainfall, has forced mandatory water rationing for the first time in city history. The odd-even plan is in effect daily except for evening hours, and city officials are confident residents will comply.
Well, I think it's going to be real good. We have had, last year, when we went on water rationing or asked the people to not use water, well, they did real good. We came right on back up with it.
Anyone caught breaking the rationing ordinance can face up to a $100 fine plus time in jail. This rationing plan is the first step in a four-part process to make sure Shawnee does not run out of water. Ironically, the city last year completed this new water plant, which is capable of pumping plenty of water. They just don't have very much water now. Tony Stizza, Action 4, Shawnee.
Milton Smith is an inspector with the State Department of Agriculture. Smith and other inspectors have just started making the rounds. They're making the rounds to fruit stands, supermarkets, and warehouses. What Smith and the other inspectors are doing is installing insect traps. These traps are designed to catch Mediterranean fruit flies. This does not mean there is an infestation of fruit flies in Oklahoma, because that's not the reason at all. Dr. Newt Floor with the State Department of Agriculture says this is just a precautionary step.
If there should be any adult flies emerge, they probably would be attracted to these trap areas. They're put out by the thousands in California, as you well know, and attempted to delete or delimit the area of infestation there. And this is just simply a precaution on our part to try to be ready in case we should have anything like that happen here.
Inspectors will keep busy next week putting up the traps, and state officials will continue to check fruit coming in from California. Ben McCain, Action 4 at Farmers Market.